Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be about how I made this brown and cream flying fox. It's got a cream neck, really thick faux fur. So that is what we have. So if you want to know how I made him, then keep watching. Alright, so once again starting out with a resin cast of the head. So this is something that I've sculpted in monster clay. I sculpted it to be able to have glass eyes inside when I cast it. And if you want to know how I cast the glass eyes inside of a resin head, I have a tutorial in my shop. Just head over to creaturesinthat.com and you can find it in the tutorial section. And I go through the process of how I put the actual glass eyes into the resin heads, and when you cast it, you pull it out and there's a nice glass eyes inside. So once that's all cast and ready to go, I usually prime my pieces before I paint. That goes for polymer clay ones as well. So I prime it with it's just a canvas primer, and it works really well for resins and polymer clay because they're quite slippery, I guess. And it helps to adhere the paint to the surface. So I'm painting it in some acrylic water-based paint, and always test out your paints or primers or anything that you put on your pieces beforehand to see how it reacts, because sometimes paints can have a weird reaction with resins especially. But I use the brand Derivian Matisse and also Chromacryl to paint all of my resin and polymer clay pieces. So I usually do a pretty rough coat to begin with on all my pieces before I put it all together, and then I do like a refining paint once the doll's all put together. So I went ahead and decided to paint the whole head black, and I'm going to be painting the eyes for these flying foxes, basically because they're really dark anyway, and you can achieve a really nice effect using some glosses over the eyes to achieve like a nice wet look, which I have a video about the glosses that I use on my channel, and it'll go through what I use to achieve that wet look for the eyes. So they're just a really dark brown, and I'm going ahead and painting in the pupil for these eyes. And the pupils I made quite small for this doll because if you look at reference photos of flying foxes, they have really small pupils. So I went ahead and did that, just being really careful while painting it and making sure that everything is symmetrical. So I leave that aside and let that dry, and while that's going, I can start working on the body and the faux fur pieces. So this flying fox is going to have a brown body and like a cream neck. It's just a different kind of color that I came up with, and I thought it would look really good. So I'm basically drawing out the bottom half of the flying fox for this, and then I'm going to be adding the cream part to the neck area once this is all cut out. So I'm just roughly cutting out the shapes of this big piece of faux fur, and then I can go ahead and cut all the pieces out without this big piece of fur attached. And I also like to use small sharp scissors to cut out all my pieces. This is because I can get in between the pile, and you can see this pile is quite thick. So you're going to be a little bit careful with thicker faux furs as well, just to sort of insert that blade in between the pile and the backing, and then just cut out the backing, and you get faster the more you do it, and you'll find a tool that works for you as well. You can use bigger scissors, you can use blades, but I prefer to use small scissors. So once that's done, I don't really do much sewing on the sewing machine for this one. I only really sew up the leg area and one half of the neck because it needs to be a lot of hand sewing. So I need to insert these wings I'm currently working on in between the body. So if you want to, I'm working on a proper tutorial for the wings, but I have a really quick sort of tutorial version on how I made them. They're not the same, but they're very, very similar, the process, on my Patreon, if you want to check that out and see how I made them. So you can see what I mean by I wanted to insert the wings in between the body. So that's why I didn't do a whole lot of machine sewing, and it's hand sewed because I have to sew the wings to the body itself. So what I did is I constructed the ball and socket armature inside, and then attached all of those resin pieces that I was painting before, and also had the wings in between that ball and socket armature. Again, you can find that how I did that over on my Patreon. And then once that's all ready, I glued the head to the neck area, and then I can start sewing. So that provides like a good solid base to start sewing everything together. And as I'm sewing, I'm adding some polyfill in between the pieces just to bulk it out and give it some shape. And then once that's done, I can start gluing up all the pieces. I should say I use a lattice stitch to sew my pieces up as well. And it's a really great strong stitch. You just want to get yourself a good quality thread to work with. So once that's done, like I said, I can glue up all the pieces. I use a tacky fabric glue from the shop here in Australia called Spotlight. You can find anything in your local craft store. It's just like a clear, thick, tacky glue that's for fabric, and it works really well to adhere fabrics to resins. But like I said before, do test it beforehand and see how it reacts with your resin and polymer clays. I haven't had a problem here. It adheres really well, and it's really tough to get off. I usually leave it to dry overnight to make sure it's nice and stuck, but it usually sticks within a couple of hours, but I like to leave it just a bit longer to make sure it is fully adhered. And then once this is done, I can clean up the fur with some trimming. I have a trimming video on my YouTube, on my Patreon as well, if you want to know how I trim my fur. And also this little doll is available in my shop, so check out my shop at creaturesandnat.com. You'll find a couple of flying foxes in there, including this one in different colorways. But I really enjoyed making these flying foxes. It's something completely different. I'm currently working on a hammerhead bat at the moment that will be available, but it will be available for my patrons first and then to my shop. So check that out as well. Thanks for watching. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. I really appreciate it. Check it all out. It's in my description box, including my Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Creatures of Nat, and my shop at creaturesandnat.com. And I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!